Nonetheless, mate, how are you? You've got a shiny under their eye, but that doesn't
Yeah, got
happen too
on.
often.
Nah, and it wasn't actually. I didn't actually get caught. We were grappling, and one of my training partners named Alistair like turned back towards me at the same time I sat up after I was like kind of triangle choking him, and it his elbow caught me in the eye socket. So
Oh,
I don't know if you can see, but the most recent video I put on Instagram, the poor kid getting an absolute flogging at the end of the reel, that's him. So he got his back.
oh no, you're an evil man. You're
Yeah.
an evil man. I can only imagine.
Uh,
Um, Mate, it's been a while since you've been on a double stream because you've been away for a little bit. So
yeah, I know. I've been so flat out. I even I actually messaged Heath. I was like, mate, get me on, Heater. I need some banter. Get me involved. And
yeah,
so
you
he said
do.
he said let's put you on with Jakey. And I said, all right, done.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, because one of the I think your first stream, and I reckon there's a couple of clips that Dabble cut up, but like you went on a hot streak. You called out
Oh
about three horses, and some of the clips, you and one of your mates, you turned up in those loud shirts.
yeah,
It was unbelievable. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
he's set in stone as a Dabble legend now.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. I actually was talking on the golf course about that the other day from someone from Dabble. They said, "Yeah, mate, after that first stream, it just went from there." And I said, "Yeah, it was a good stream to start on."
Yeah, it was as good as it gets, mate. Well, I know we had a podcast a few weeks ago, but we'll probably regurgitate a few questions, and obviously all the dabblers keep shooting some questions in because I know everyone's excited to ask Jack some stuff. But last fight in Jacksonville was a huge win. I mean, how's it sort of settled in with you now? Have you sort of gone back and reviewed the fight in any depth, or is it something you've just moved on
Um,
now looking to Sydney?
Not really, because it's such a quick turnaround to Sydney. Like, I only got home. Like, I actually was just sitting down with someone in a meeting just then, and I only got home like from today, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago. So it's like and then I've been two of those weeks I've been in camp for getting ready for this next fight. So I haven't had really much time to let stuff soak in. It's more about just keeping the wheels rolling for me at this point.
Yeah, well, it's pretty cool. I think you was it last week. You messaged me. You're like, bro, just got a message from the UFC. They want to fly me up to Sydney because it was like the launch of the tickets, and it was like
Mm.
the three fighters they have like representing the Aussie card, and like just the pumping it up was Alex Volkanovski, Tai Tuivasa, and the boy from Bacchus Marsh, Jack Jenkins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was best dressed and
I know.
best answers of the three.
What did you have to do? Like, what was the process at that?
I got picked up at the front of me apartment, taken to the airport. I flew up at 2 p.m. Had a limo pick me up in Sydney, which I was in a Mercedes G-Class long wheelbase. Oh, it was mint. And
God.
then I had a security guard with me all day. And the security guard came and opened the door, and there was like a heap of fans and stuff there. And then they kind of like ushered me through to a green room. Then we went out on did like a red carpet type thing, and there was a few like influencers there. Like they'd organised it with like KO and main event, and they had some like people from maths and stuff there, and I'm like, "Fuck's going on here?" Like, and they
Yeah,
didn't even do anything. I was like, "What are they even doing here?" Like they weren't doing interviews or anything. They were just kind of standing around. But then we did like interviews. Like I had an interview with Isaac Heaney, which is pretty cool because I'm a big Sydney Swans fan. So
oh, that's right. I forget that you're a Bloods guy.
yeah, Bloods. And then they had Heaney there. So I talked to Heaney for a bit, did a few other interviews here and there. And then they took me, Bam Bam, and Volk out the back and waited to introduce us up on stage while they did like the launch. Because now main event and KO are the only places that you can watch the UFC. You can't get it through Fight Pass anymore. You used to be able to buy it on like the PlayStation store and shit like that. That's all done now. The only place you can get it is through KO and main event. Um, so yeah, that was it. And then we went up on stage. We answered some questions. I got thrown a few curly questions, which was pretty funny actually. There was this one kid who I went up. Volk and Bam Bam obviously had a little bit more media stuff to do than me. They were in a little bit higher demand. So I
Yeah.
had a break of like a couple of minutes, and they kept all the fans on the outside of this, like they had like barricades up. So I just said to like girl who was handling me, I was like, am I allowed to just go over there? And she was like, yeah, just don't go outside the fence. So I just went over and was talking to all like giving high fives and signing shirts and shit for all the punters. And this one bloke was like, you're my favourite fighter, Jack, blah, blah, blah. And he was pumped up and he got me to sign his shirt. And then when we were up on stage, I saw him lining up to ask a question. And I'm like, oh, what's this question going to be from this cat? And he gets to the front and he goes, this is a question for Jack. And I go, here we go. And he goes, when are you going to smash Volko and take his belt? I'm sitting right next to Volk, and I kind of looked at Volk and we both laughed. And I said, "Oh, do you want to answer this one or me?" And he said, "Oh, you go." And I said, "Oh, look, Volk's had 5 title defenses, and Jose Aldo, who was my hero growing up, had 7." And I said, so he defends the title 2 more times. He ties with Aldo for 7 title defenses, most ever at featherweight. I would like to fight him for that 8th title defense. So when he's going to break that record, either he becomes the unequivocal GOAT of the division, or the belt passes to another Aussie who's on the way up." And then the guy was like, yep, cool. And then Volk looked at me and kind of slapped it up and went, yeah, all right, well, let's see. So,
bro, this is what people forget. You are the smartest guy when it comes to responses. Out of everything you could have said, you've won the crowd over, you've won Volk over, and you've said, yeah, but I'm still going to try and win the title.
Yeah,
I hate you. I hate you. All on the spot.
Yeah, I've got lots of spare time and all I do is think.
Yeah, well, that's true. We've got a question here from MMA God, and self-explanatory what you're into, big fella, but he wants to know, how was Bam Bam? And maybe to elaborate on that, what's Bam Bam like?
Yeah, well, I got another good one. Bam Bam's funny as. So Bam Bam, I get along with him great. We've spent a bit of time together. But he was sitting next to me and we got asked one question and I said my answer, and then we went to an ad break. And Bam Bam looks at me and he's like, gee, you actually know heaps about fighting, don't you? And I was like, oh, yeah, a fair bit. And he's like, oh, I don't watch fighting. I don't give a fuck. Like, I just go bang. Like exactly what you would expect. He's like, nah, I just go bang. And then they sent to a promo of Gagey and Poirier. And the producer comes out and he goes, 2 minutes. You're back on in 2 minutes after this promo. And I said to the boys, I said, hey, boys, who have you got in this fight? And they both said Poirier. And I said, oh, well, this will be good TV because I'm going to go Gagey. And they go, why are you going to go Gagey? And I said, oh, because it's at altitude. It's at Salt Lake City. And Gagey trains at altitude in Denver and Poirier trains at sea level. So I thought if it went into the later rounds, which most of us thought it was going to go, Gagey would start to take over. And Volk goes, that's such a good answer. That's like, I didn't think about that when I did my breakdown. Now you're making me second guess myself. And Bam Bam goes, you just know heaps of shit, eh? You just know heaps of shit. I'm like,
I love him. I love Bam Bam.
And then the best part, then they come back from the break and the host of the TV show goes, all right, guys, so we've just had a look at the promo for Poirier and Gagey there. Let's get a few predictions. Let's throw to you first, Ty. Who you got? And Ty picks up the microphone and he goes, yeah, look, I've got Justin Gagey because of the altitude.
He did not say that.
He did.
You and all, he just did it cold.
And like, I just started pissing myself laughing. I don't know. Have you seen that old Soldier Boy clip where he's like, he stole my whole fucking flow, word for word, bar for bar. I just sat there saying that, and then Volk was like laughing. It was good shit.
Oh, Bam Bam's good banter. Do you know what? When you told me about that, I was like, fuck, Poirier's a bit of a beast. But just to break down that fight, like, one, what did you think of the overall fight? And then the finish as well. I think caught everyone off guard, even Poirier, obviously. But what was your take on it?
Look, I wasn't expecting a head kick from Gagey. Like, I think anyone who says that is just, dreaming. I don't think he's ever thrown a head kick, or maybe a couple, and they haven't looked so well set up as that one. But I did think Gagey would win. Like, I think the difference between them in their first fight was really small, and I thought Poirier was still very much the same fighter, whereas Gagey was a completely different fighter. So I thought that Gagey probably only needed to get 5 or 10% better from that first fight to end up on top. And even I was quite confident in the, I'm not allowed to bet on the UFC, but I obviously give my predictions and that sort of thing. And I was quite confident after the first round that Gagey was going to win. Like, he just looked a little crisper, a little cleaner. He has his own style, right? Like, he kind of rolls a lot and he looks a little off balance at times, but he was definitely getting the better of the exchanges. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with it in the end. But I could never have picked Gagey by a right-to-right head kick.
Man,
But
it was crazy. It was like a little bit unorthodox as well. Like even the way his sort of body was, like it was, it just looked a bit strange as well. How it
yeah.
must have connected.
So anytime, like, I'll get a bit too in detail, but some people might be interested. Anytime that you've got fighters that are going in opposite stances, so one in southpaw, one in orthodox, or vice versa, and obviously Dustin's a southpaw. Anytime that comes into play, it's very different in MMA to any of the other striking sports. Because in boxing, when someone throws a right hand, you can slip to your back leg off the right hand, right? If you're a southpaw. But in MMA and even Thai boxing, it's a little different as well. If I throw my right hand at you and you slip to your back leg, you've slipped towards my head kick. So you would see it was the same thing when Leon and Kamaru were in opposite stances. It was the same kick, just on the opposite side. So what we do, we call it like a right to right or a left to left. So if you're in the opposite stance to me, I'll throw my rear hand, and if I see you dip to slip to the outside of it one time, I'll put that in as a mental note, and then the next time I'll go, here's my right hand, but here's my foot behind it. So you actually kind of lean into my kick as I throw it up.
Wow. So in short, what you're saying is Gagey's picked up something there, and there's no luck behind that because it was a pretty random throw of a kick. Like, do you think he's thought about that, or you reckon he got lucky?
100%. Yeah. Watch the first round. Watch Poirier pulls off to his left side to come back with his cross hook. So he goes, well, here, pull off this, straight into the head kick.
Dude, that's the breakdown of Jack. These are the conversations you have with Jack when he talks about fighting. What do you think of the overall card? I mean, 291. It's pretty epic, I thought. Like, as a fan,
really good.
It's relentless with just good shit.
Yeah, the UFC is just stacking like huge cards together that are just delivering. Like, if you're a UFC fan, there hasn't really been a better sort of 12-month block for fights and stuff.
So true.
Like, I've been watching fights since I was 12 or 13, and just like the amount of great fights you get at a really high level these days. Like, I remember you might get like 3 a year back in the day when it used to be like, oh, Jose Aldo's fighting, or John Jones is fighting, or Anderson Silva's fighting Vitor Belfort. Like, back in the day, they were few and far between. Whereas now every other week you just have a stacked card with, a few big fights you can watch.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, speaking of stacked cards, I probably want to ask you a little bit about Fight Camp at first, because I reckon there's a few of the dabblers in the chat. I will ask this question before I go into that, because it's a good, funny question, MMA God. What do you think about Derek Lewis's flying knee?
I didn't expect that either. That was huge.
Unbelievable.
He's just like such an endearing character, isn't he? Like,
my balls was hard. Yeah.
Like, I think the thing about the UFC that most people love is just like authenticity. Like, if you're authentic to who you are, even if it's boring or like not that interesting, or like no matter what it is, just be authentic to yourself, and eventually you'll get heaps of fans for it. Like, I think it's so cool. And you watch Derek Lewis, and he's like, he just says like random shit that he would say like around his mates and stuff, and it's just come across so well. And now everyone loves him. It's awesome.
Yeah, UFC are the best at embracing those personalities too. Steve-O's got probably one of the greatest questions, and I can't believe I've never even asked this, but this is going to be so interesting to hear your answer. What has been the biggest difference or misconception from when you were a young aspiring fighter to actually being in the UFC octagon?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Fucking hell. I can't believe I've never thought to ask you that. I'm trying to think,
because there's one really, really obvious time when I was young. So I trained from when I was 13, and I always wanted to be in the UFC, but I didn't go to my first live UFC event until I was 18. And I was with my boss at the time, who's a really good friend of mine now. And we were sitting in the crowd, and I remember after like 2 or 3 fights, I turned to him and I said, oh, I'm going to fight in the UFC. Like, I definitely want to do it. I'm going to do it one day. And he was like, yep, like, I believe you can do it, sort of thing. But I remember watching the fighters It was back when it was MGM Grand Arena, and I was in the line to get into the show, and there was like a fighters access where they used to come straight down from the hotel and walk in like the same entrance as us essentially. And I remember looking at the fighters like unpacking their bags for security to go to the back rooms at the MGM. And like I think probably the biggest misconception is that you think it's going to be different on the biggest stage, but it's not at all. Like I always found it more difficult to picture myself fighting like some guy on the local scene. Like I would get quite jittery about fighting someone on the local scene, but then in my head, if I envisioned fighting like Chad Mendes in a UFC cage, that didn't worry me at all because it was like, that bright lights, that I'll get used to it.
Yeah.
But the biggest misconception is I thought it would be different, and it's not different at all. It's still like you just get in there and you just have a cage fight, and it's still just you, and you got 2 arms and 2 legs against another guy who's got 2 arms and 2 legs. That's the biggest thing. Like nothing else
Yeah.
matters, and you still like the time at your time you spend at the gym is exactly the same. Like I don't do anything different at the gym now than I used to back in the day. Obviously, like different techniques, and I change my training schedule over time, but I don't do anything different, and I don't feel any different. You still show up, and you still have days where you feel shit, and you still have days where you feel like, fuck, give me Islam now, I'd take it. Like, but it's all the same shit.
Yeah. What about and this would be a good split between Perth and Jacksonville, because for everyone listening, I was at Perth and me and Jack have spoke about it, and a lot of people there said it was the greatest sporting event, not just UFC event, that they've ever been to. But one thing I noticed when I played professional sport was like, even though you lays it in, the loudness of the crowd, and like you struggle to hear yourself, like maybe with you, your coach is talking to you, or even at times hear yourself think. Like you had a pretty rude entrance into Perth because it was absolutely electric in there. Just want to know, like, is that something you block out naturally because you're throwing punches, or were you aware of like, fuck, this shit is as loud as anything?
I blocked it out when I got in the ring, and I didn't really hear anything when I was in the cage because, like I said, that's all exactly the same. But the walkout was like so different, and it was like it was the best thing. Like it was the best. Like I loved it. Like, and it's addictive. Like it's so addictive. Like that's why I always wanted to have lots of fights this year, but it's so easy to get G'd up for it because I'm like, can't wait to do that walk again in Sydney. Because
can you imagine what Sydney's going to be like if Perth was like that?
I'm thinking even further ahead. I'm thinking wait until we come to Melbourne. Like it's just going to be insane.
Where would we do it in Melbourne though? Because I know they did Marvel, but like I don't think Marvel does it justice.
They're going to do Rod Laver. I hope. I'm not, and I'm speaking way off the card here, but I think it's going to be February at Rod Laver.
Right. Okay. It's funny, right? Because you run that route, like that's your running route every sort of like fight camp through the MCG.
You've done that run a couple of times with me.
Well, I would say I've done it. I've rode the bike.
Rode the bike next to me.
Yeah. I can't keep up with you, mate. Just a bit of a bomb drop today was McGregor throwing up signature. Like, is he coming? Did you see that? Did you see a photo?
No, I didn't see it. It would have been a fight.
Yeah, well, he put up a photo today, and it was like essentially like a signature. Like, made no context, no like typical McGregor shit. Do you reckon he's going to fight this year? Is it like even possible for him to fight?
I don't know. It's all smoke and mirrors. All smoke and mirrors. Like that, he's just so full of it. Like, I don't know. He's a legend. Sometimes when you get out, it's hard to answer questions about McGregor, right? And like, you would probably get this if you got asked about like certain soccer players, but I feel like I get asked questions about McGregor, and you feel like you're standing on the shoulders of a giant, like throwing stones down at him. Like
it makes no sense.
He just did so much for the sport and like raised all of our ceilings by so much. And then they get asked like, what do you think about McGregor doing this or that? And I'm like, I don't really have an opinion. Like, just let him do his thing. Ask me about his legacy. I'm not too concerned about what he does now. I'm not going to sit here and pot off at him.
Well, tell me, let's spin it then. Tell me, like, what he, in your eyes, has done for your game and your ceiling now. Because without McGregor, your ceiling, and you could, if there's no McGregor, you could win 15 fights in a row, be a world champion. But with McGregor, if you do that, it's a different ballgame.
The whole sport is infinitely better off for having had McGregor in it. I would argue that the world is better off for having had McGregor in it.
Yeah,
Like
dude.
the amount of joy and good times he brought to people on that run that he had was just outrageous. But for me personally, I don't think I've ever even told you this story, Jake, but Jose Aldo was my favorite fighter growing up, right? So I loved Jose Aldo. And when I was 18, I was going to turn pro and start my MMA career. And my coach kind of said to me, mate, you've got all the talent in the world, but I don't know if you're mature enough. I don't think it's the right time. And I've seen people who have got into the UFC really early and haven't done well, right? Or have done well and then they struggle a little bit later on or whatever. And my coach, probably a lot of wisdom in that, said to me, why don't you just take some time and be a kid for a bit, keep training, keep fit, but don't worry about fighting. And I said, yeah, sweet. And I went to Canada, and I was in Canada for a couple of years, and I was training a little bit, but not really, sort of just being young. And the exact moment we can go back onto my Facebook feed and you can find the status. The exact moment when Jose Aldo got KO'd by McGregor, I was at a pub in Canada, and as soon as I saw him knock out Jose, I made a status on my phone. I was like, somebody tag Dana White. I'm coming home and I'm going to start training like I'm going to be in the UFC. And I'm like, I want to fight. I want to fight for that belt. Right?
What was it about that made you that instinct? What changed?
Well, I was in a pub when I was used to being in pubs in Australia, and I would sneak into a pub on a Sunday to watch the UFC, and there'd be 5 to 10 people watching it of diehard fans wearing tap out shirts and affliction shirts in Melton. And then all of a sudden McGregor's come in and there's hundreds and hundreds of people packing out a pub, and every single one of them is just glued to the TV screen to watch this fight. And then there was kind of a piece of me at the time that was like, how dare he do that to Jose? Like, that's my guy.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
I was like,
awkward
I wanted to get revenge almost.
Yeah.
And then I moved home and went straight back to the gym, and I've been full time at it since then.
Well, do you know what's interesting, right? And this is for all the dabblers out there, because
mate, sorry, can I just ask a question? Who's running the Dabble TV account?
They're in love with you, aren't they?
Is it Josh Jeans or because I can't tell if they're taking the piss out of me or if they're genuinely supportive.
Oi, let's run with they're taking the piss out of you and Dabble TV. You are on notice.
If they're taking the piss, I want to know who it is behind
Steve-O, rat him out. Steve-O, rat him out.
I don't know.
No, it's Steve-O. You Dabble TV? Is that you? Surely not.
It's just like Big Brother. It's like there is no Dabble TV. It's like there is no.
I was like such great storytelling.
Nah, Steve-O's not taking the piss. Whoever Dabble TV is.
Nah, Steve-O, you asked one of the greatest questions of all time before.
Nah, that was a great question, Steve-O.
You know what I wanted to say, though? Because what's interesting, and I never really knew that about your coach kind of delaying you moving into a pro environment, which for those that obviously watched Jack's last fight in Jacksonville against Jamal Emmers, who UFC Fight Night, I think this week, Corey Sandhagen's the main event, and Jamal Emmers beat Corey Sandhagen. But when Jack beat Jamal Emmers, Jack told me, and Jack, you can elaborate on this, and it goes back to your coach, who's probably made the right call here, is Jamal Emmers couldn't believe how calm and composed you were for someone who's only had like 12 or 13 fights. 13 fights, was it? And it's just like that comment probably doesn't happen if you don't go the route that you did.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, Jamal, we didn't speak much after the fight. He's a pretty collected and quiet guy. But the one thing he said to me in the cage, he goes, I could not believe you were that calm and collected for 13 fights. You're so collected in the firefights and in between, and just nothing seemed to faze me. which is good. So that's a good compliment to have. And I think the commentators were saying something along the same lines of like, we're going to see these two guys in this division and at the top of the division for a long time.
Love that.
Which I've been
Love
saying for years. So it's
Yeah.
it's good to start hearing that from people with a bit of credibility in the industry.
Yeah, you're not surprised, as they say. I want to flip the script a little bit because I want to use your brain for some tips for everyone. So we can go down the horse racing route first, but I also want to maybe, without making it obvious, just get your opinions on this week's fight night too. We've only got 5 minutes, so we'll keep it sharp.
You can make it obvious. I'm allowed to give as many tips as I want.
Well,
I'm just not allowed.
Sandhagen Font.
Sandhagen.
Jessica Andrade and Tatiana Suarez. Did I say her name right?
As a general rule, I don't bet on girl fights, and I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't give tips on girl
Oh,
fights.
we like honesty. Good.
Yeah.
Dustin Jacoby Kennedy. Can't say that last name.
Dustin Jacoby. Yeah, Jacoby.
All right, and then we'll round it out with Lopez and Gavin Tucker.
Ooh.
Featherweights.
Yeah, I know them. I'm going to go Lopez.
Are you expecting like those sort of Sandhagen Font, the Dustin Jacoby fight, Lopez? Is this like a good fight night? Is this going to be a good card?
Yeah, I reckon it's hard because half the time those ones are sleepers. Like and it's hard for me, right? Like usually I'd be able to tell you exactly what's going on, but as soon as I'm doing my own training, I kind of zone out a lot of that other stuff, right? Like I compartmentalize it. So then for me, like now, I couldn't tell you who really is on that card because all I'm thinking is about me personally.
Well, that's right. Yeah, Jackson Camp, everyone. For those that didn't put two and two together, what about on on horses? I know it might be a bit early for some mail, but you're usually always across the ball with it.
I've got one bet for this weekend. Let me just quickly find what race it's in so I can give you a proper go at it. Is it at Rose Hill?
Jack's form, everyone, on horses on Dabble. It's probably, I don't know what it's been like across the board, but there's definitely been some big winners, some very calculated bets.
Yeah,
a lot of friends in the horse racing game.
Yeah, I like my big thing is I bet for fun, but it's more fun if you actually bet based on like some kind of research you've done or like something like that, like a bit of worthwhile behind giving someone a tip. But we're looking at Rose Hill Race 8, which is the Missile Stakes over 1,200. I really like I Am Me.
Rose Hill Race. Sorry, I completely missed what race. Oh, Toyota, the Missile Stakes, and you've gone
Missile Stakes.
Yep.
I Am Me. Yep. Clarkie on board. Kieran Maher and David Eustace. Look, it's a good race. You got some good horses in there. Obviously, Golden Mile, the Cummings horse, the Derby winner from last year. Ingratiating, who's just coming off a win, and Zach Lloyd's going up there. I just think I Am Me sets well for this race. The low gate isn't a problem for me. It's carrying no weight, and I think should get a good run up at Rosehill. I think the track's going to suit that low gate as well.
I love it, guys. Get on it. I Am Me, Rosehill Race 8. I reckon post Sydney, we've already got some plans going, but surely we're on a Saturday stream together.
Oh, well, let's get a little bit of pump up going on a couple of things. Yes. So number one, keep your eye out for some new merch because I have it on good authority that the next Farjack merch drop, and when I say I have it on good authority, I've consulted myself on it, and the next Farjack merch drop is going to be a collaboration with none other than Dabble. So it's going to be Dabble by Farjack merch. So keep an eye on like the UFC banter channels, keep an eye on my socials and the Dabble socials, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to win a couple of those, or just purchase them directly off me.
Guys, if we are not buying these off the shelf coming into Sydney, like we have our own man on Dabble that is the biggest up and coming UFC star in the country. We are buying this shit off the shelf.
Well, here's another thing. So last time I did hoodies for my last one, right? And I ordered, I think I got 300 or 400 hoodies. I can't remember the exact number. And I put all of them except like 30 up that I kept for myself for some family and stuff. And they sold out in like 6 hours.
Whoa.
So
Whoa.
now I've got to get a few more than that, but I'm hoping that we get a few, with the Dabble. We're gonna have the Dabble. I've actually got a meeting with the Dabble designers tomorrow.
I was going to say,
And
yeah. Oh, so you haven't got the design yet? Is that what's tomorrow is going to
no,
be?
that's tomorrow at midday. I've got that,
Sick.
so I'm actually so pumped to get those out. And there'll be a bit of other stuff. Like I can't say too much because we're still working through all the details. But there's going to be a fair bit of stuff going on at UFC Sydney with sort of like a Farjack and Dabble collaboration. So if your Dabble is from Sydney, keep an eye out on everything that's going on with the UFC because there might be some opportunities there.
Oh, there's going to be a lot going on, guys. We're going to blow up Dabble Sydney. We're going to blow up Sydney in general. Jack will be there. There's merch coming, which was inside knowledge, but now everyone knows it's being designed. It's coming. It's going to be red hot. Jackie, but I'm gonna let you go. Love you and leave you, and then I know you're going to whip me in the morning. We're back at training, so
yeah, we're back at 8:30.
Yeah, 8:30 we starting or 8?
No, 8.
Yeah. Back at 8. So that'll be good, man. But yeah, good to have you back, mate. Good to have you back in the stream. You've been away for a while.
Yeah, I know. It's good to be back. Good to be back. And I probably will be MIA. But what we've got coming up is UFC Sydney, where you're going to get fucking nothing but Farjack on your screens. Doesn't matter which screen you look at. If it's the little screen or the big screen, you're going to get Farjack. And then after that, we've got Spring Racing Carnival. So let's absolutely launch into some good times for spring.
Yep. We'll be drunk for a month. It'll be awesome.
It'll be sick.
Can't wait, brother. All right, bro. I'll let you go. Enjoy your night, mate.
Good
Thanks
to talk
again.
to everyone. We'll catch up.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.